Good morning. I'm sitting down with Matt Bufis right now from Evanston Township High School. Good morning, Matt. How are you?
Good morning, Don. Happy to be here.
Yeah, happy to be here. Sunday morning, beautiful Evanston, Illinois, 9 a.m. on a December Sunday there. So
Yep.
This is what we do. So again, thanks for being out here. Let's just begin right away. You're not an Illinois guy, are you?
No, originally from New Jersey, actually.
And tell me about that. Tell me about, I don't know, growing up in New Jersey, musical life, and, how you ended up here today in Evanston.
Yeah, sure. So I grew up in New Jersey. New Jersey is the Garden State. And everyone I tell that to is like, I've been to New Jersey. I just see the Parkway and, the Turnpike and I don't know what you're talking about, but actually the gardens are in my hometown of Ringwood. So a very pretty place. Grew up in a, wooded area, Ramapo Mountains, lots of lakes in our town. So swimming was a big thing for me growing up. And, I started music I think the pretty typical public school way, fifth grade band, started on saxophone. And switched to tenor in middle school because all the good kids were doing it. And then when I got to high school, I stayed on tenor my freshman year, and then I switched to euphonium my sophomore year because there was a cute girl in the euphonium section. And I ended up getting pretty good at it, and made the regional honor bands and things like this, and then started looking at colleges, and I ended up going to Ithaca College, which coincidentally was Steve and Beth Peterson's first year. 1998 was my freshman year. So I did 4 years at Ithaca while also swimming on the Division III swim team. Sophomore and junior year, and I did a little bit more my senior year, but then when I started student teaching, I realized I couldn't do the 5 a.m. practice thing and then make it out to my student teaching placement, and so I bailed after about a week of that. Okay. But it was a good decision, and had a great student teaching experience. And then I really wanted to teach high school, and I had some offers to teach elementary school and middle school and in different places close to where I grew up. Even had an offer in Texas to teach middle school, but I was super passionate about teaching high school, and my high school offer was in Maryland. At a school called Great Mills High School. And so I moved to Maryland with no ties to Maryland, and taught there for 4 years. And it was that was a really challenging but rewarding ultimately run. It was a rural area, but had a significant history early on for a couple of reasons. The school itself was one of the last to desegregate. Okay. And there was there were challenges around that still in the early 2000s when I was teaching there. But musically speaking, there was actually a significant, maybe 10, 12-year chapter of really fine playing and an excellent band program. A gentleman by the name of Larry Brown taught there. At the same time, a few miles down the road, St. Mary's College, a small private school, was really happening and doing kind of a summer program. I would equate to, not at the same level, but so people get the idea, like a Blue Lake or an Interlochen. And so a lot of the kids were going there. And so the band program got really good, and Aaron Copeland was at the school at one point, Vincent Persichetti, Norman Dello Gioio, a young Eric Ewazen was involved, Alec Wilder, some great names in the 60s were at that school working with the kids, and so obviously the program really benefited, and I have some old cassette tapes in the gymnasium of, the Persichetti Symphony and some really great kind of old, recordings. So it was cool to uncover that. So we were able to kind of have a little bit of a renaissance in the early 2000s and rebuild and have Eric Ewazen out and do his Concerto for Marimba and Wind Ensemble with Bob Snyder who was at the Navy Band at the time. So had a great, run there. And then I just decided I wanted to go back and do my master's. It was something I always wanted to do with the intention of maybe pursuing college and staying on and doing a doctorate as well, or going to a different school. And so I applied to Midwest schools because most of my kind of mentors and idols at Ithaca had Midwest degrees, Mark Fonder, Stephen Beth Peterson, etc. And so I looked at Northwestern and Indiana and U of I, and I ultimately chose U of I because of the history and the tradition there and the marching band and, everything about that place. And so I was there for 2 years, 06 to 08, and I was with Joe Manfredo my first year in music ed while assisting in bands and doing work with the Marching Illini and some of the concert bands. And then in my second year, I was given the position of TA in the band department with Mr. Keene, and Barry Hauser and I actually shared an office as TAs at the time. And I was with Pete Griffin and Dan Neuenschwander, and so that was a really great experience too. Another challenging experience, just in different levels. And then upon graduation, I should say, while I was there, I was sitting in the balcony watching all these great bands at Superstate, and just wanting to be a part of that. We didn't have that kind of band culture where I was on the East Coast. There are certainly pockets of great bands on the East Coast for sure. But I just had never seen so many bands of that caliber in one place. So I decided to stay and see what I could do here. And so I got my first job in Illinois at a very small school in Westmont, which is a southwest suburb of Chicago. And there's only 500 kids in the high school, five and a quarter or something like this. And so we had a band of 60, one band, 9 through 12. And we did some nice things there too. Cultivated a nice culture and made, Superstate in single A, and really enjoyed my time there. I mean, you got to know the families very well. And it was also one of these programs where you got to help in starting the kids in 5th grade. And so they got to know you, and there was ownership, and cultivating all of that was really rewarding. And then I started applying to some of the larger schools, and ultimately ended up here at Evanston. And this is my 8th year now at Evanston Township, and we've done a lot of great things already, but I still have a long time to go, which I say is a good thing. Yeah. So it's exciting to think about kind of where this is going to go.
It's interesting to hear where you started, where you went, where you're at now, because it seemed like there was nothing really tying you down to New Jersey there.
Yeah, I think I kind of just, you maybe go to college and think you might meet someone that you want to settle down with, and that just didn't happen. And I didn't have the kind of high school program maybe that exposed me to all of the, like, how far this thing can go. Sure. So I really just had no idea until I got to college, and really until I started teaching and I saw the top end of it, and I wasn't tied down, romantically. And so I just really dug in and focused on being a good teacher, and I poured a lot of my own finances into the programs I was a part of when I was single. In fact, when my wife and I first got together, I was still paying off some of the choices I made to fund and resource the programs I was a part of initially. For better or worse, I'm not encouraging anyone to do that. That was my path, and ultimately, I think it turned out okay. I ended up in a really terrific program. But I'm sure there's other ways to do that.
Sure. But not even just tied down romantically. I know sometimes I'm thinking just as a new teacher, starting out, what I'll hear a lot is, I want high school, or I want junior high, or I want general music, and I want it here in this 20-mile radius. And we always say it's a small world, but it's also a big world too. Like, there's at least where we're at, there's 50 states here. And you hear stories sometimes of people not getting where they want to end up. And then you realize, well, maybe if I would have went this route,
sure,
it could have been a little bit different. And sometimes you say you have the romantic thing that maybe ties you down, or you've got, love for your city or what's familiar, or parents or things like that.
Yeah, and I love my parents very much, and I have a sister who lives in Boston, and we all try and get together a few times a year. Yeah. It's not to say that I'm not tied down to them.
Sure.
What I can say, I guess, in contrast, Don, is that Illinois is a very big state, and there's a lot of in-state schools that are very good, and so people who want to stay here tend to go to those schools, which then place them in good student teaching environments in the area where they ultimately want to end up. Yeah. The East Coast, the states are much smaller. They're much closer together, and so you tend to leave your state to go to a different school, and we all know how hard it is to get back to where you are if you're not connected. And ultimately, there's a stigma in our profession, better or worse, that, you have to start at a certain place and work your way up. Or because you've been starting at this place, you can't work your way up because you don't have the skill set, which I think we can all admit is ridiculous.
Yeah.
So for better or worse, I just decided I'm going to go the high school route. This is what I'm passionate about. It's what I want to do. And I'm willing to do what I have to do that. And it was really hard at times, but I just dug in and did it. And I will say that, the area that I started, while it was challenging, it was pretty transient in terms of the teacher population, very young teacher population. And that led to a lot of us being very good friends. I moved into a house with the girls' basketball coach and the volleyball coach and the soccer coach. And so, the four of us, worked on the house together because one guy bought it, and we, my dad was an electrician, so I did all the lighting in the basement, and we finished the basement together and hung out and played video games on the side, so there was something about it, about that time and that chapter for me that kept me going,
And the positives, I think, sometimes that people don't think about is you hear about, somebody went to this school and stayed there for 30 years. But on the other hand, if you've worked in a few states or a few schools, you have a set of friends and a connection now to different places. Like, you can go to many different places now and feel comfortable. And you've got those great memories and, even some future connections that you can have with those people as well when you visit. For you, New Jersey, Boston, Maryland, Illinois.
For sure.
Probably countless other places too as well.
Yeah, for sure. I will say, because, as I said earlier, Illinois is a big state, and a lot of folks go to school here and kind of come up through it and know the systems from going from high school to college and back into the workforce. I had to reinvent myself here. I felt welcome here by others, but I was definitely an outsider, and what I did before I came here didn't matter. I needed to prove myself here in this environment and produce results in this area in order to gain credibility. Yeah. And now looking back, having those data points from my last life in Maryland or whatever matter. But, initially, and this isn't a knock on our profession. This is just what it is. You need to rebuild, you need to reinvent yourself and start over and prove yourself and be ready and willing to do that. And I wasn't, again, tied down, and, I was willing to dig in and kind of do what I needed to move up the chain,
Mike Fisk, who was at Joliet Township before I got there, would always say that whenever you leave somebody somewhere, all of your credibility is left behind. I'm like, oh, that's daunting. Let's talk swimming real quick.
Sure.
I can't swim. I have a book on swimming called Total Immersion. I haven't read it.
Oh, yeah. No, I was trained in total immersion.
Were you really?
Yeah.
So I have that book on my nightstand. It's still got a beautiful, perfect spine. It's never been opened. I'm scared to death of swimming. I think equally, I don't want to drown, and I just don't want to take my shirt off in front of people. So Alex Kaminsky comes out recently and works with the Joliet Band, and he said the people that really, have control over breathing are musicians and swimmers. Is that true?
It's very different breathing, but yes, I actually even think that my playing took a little bit of a hit when I first started swimming in college.
Okay.
So I swam, like I mentioned before, I was raised in a lake community. There were like 5-6 lakes in our community, and we would all swim against each other's lakes. We had our lake teams and whatever. And so that was kind of the summer thing. And then all winter, we didn't have a high school team at the time. They do now. But all winter I would swim club and do stroke clinics and things at a local college, William Patterson in Newark, or in Patterson rather. Anyway, so, that was part of my upbringing, but then, I had mono as I started my freshman year. And so I couldn't join the swim team. I was just kind of recovering from all of that. So I was a walk-on to the team as a sophomore. And with all of these guys that were much taller than me. I'm 5'5", by the way, barely, and much taller than me, and had been swimming year round in a far more competitive way. And I really worked my way up, almost to the point where when I was about to kind of give up, everything just started clicking with me, physically, and I got a handle of it and became pretty good and a contributor. In Division III on our team. I can tell you that my double and triple tonguing got very good.
Okay.
My professor recommended, he's like, hey, listen, you're spending all this time in the pool. How about you do some inhalations, and then as you're exhaling, you just work on your double tonguing and your triple tonguing. And I tell the kids this all the time. So I would go, and practice that. And
were there just bubbles going everywhere in front of you?
Not really thinking about it, but yeah, I'm sure there were. But you breathe in a different way. You breathe more shallow, actually, and take more breaths than you would playing an instrument. And when you play an instrument, you're breathing deeper. You have to have that air go for longer. You get in a rhythm of breathing, and so I was a backstroker. I swam butterfly, and then in my junior year, coach made me into a distance swimmer. So I actually swam the 500, the 1,000, and the 1650, which is a mile. And you just get in a rhythm when you're doing distance swimming, and so it doesn't quite transfer over to playing an instrument. But I will tell you, I learned so much from swimming, musically, the double tonguing thing, but it gives you kind of some meditation time every day. You're in the pool for 4 hours.
Yeah.
2 in the morning, 2 in the afternoon. And all of the team aspects and the coaching and all of this really transferred well to what I do. I learned a lot from that I'm still using.
I'm sure the discipline and consistency with everything too.
Yeah, for sure.
With that. So I'll make a little confession to you now. Let's switch gears a little bit. You sent me last year a recording of your band, and you were wanting people to make videos for your kids of giving some feedback as you guys got ready for the National Concert Band Festival.
Yep.
And what I told you was I didn't have time for it. when I listened to it, I went, "Oh my God, I have no feedback to give this guy." So as a friend, I say, "Oh my gosh, kudos to you! Like the band here it's insane." And I think last year, I haven't kept up with your band a lot over the 8 years that you've been here, but last year I heard that, I'm like, another level.
Yeah.
So
we had a special year. Thank you.
And you and your kids. And I remember hearing that recording in the office, and I think I had a student teacher at that point, and they're like, "Who's that?" And I said, "Well, this is Evanston." I said, "I have nothing to give them." So let's talk about how one gets there to that level, but let's maybe, if we can go and just talk about the rehearsal aspect of that. What's a rehearsal outline look for you here at Evanston High School? Maybe just typical one. We're in the middle of a concert cycle or so. And after that, maybe we can talk about what it used to look like for you, maybe back in Maryland, maybe 8 years ago, if it was different at all.
Yeah, there's a lot that goes into answering that. I'll tell you that I focus a lot on our freshmen.
Okay.
We made a decision maybe 6-7 years ago to take marching band out of the day and start concert band right away.
And non-competitive program here, or
non-competitive? Okay. We go to 2 contests, but we're not going to compete. We're going to see other bands and enjoy the top end of the activity, and from a distance.
Yeah, enjoy the bus ride, get a hot dog, go perform for an audience.
Yeah, right. Get
reflect,
the feedback.
Go home.
And in fact, one of our favorite competitions is the NIU one, because we'll go earlier in the day and do the stadium clinic and have someone work with us for an hour in a stadium, which they don't get to perform very often in.
Sure.
And then do the performance and watch so many bands at that show. So that's our focus. Is to entertain our audience. So we pick shows that are going to be exciting for our student section and the parent generation.
You're making Steve Peterson real proud right now.
And we go and do it. I think we do the activity justice for what we're trying to do. And we revamped our pregame show that hadn't been done in a couple decades. We make an E on the field. We run on like the U of I and, the whole deal. Flip the tubas, and so we've really like found ourselves in the activity and are comfortable there. But so back to your question, we decided to take that out of the school day and just go to a one evening a week and do the Saturday thing for rehearsals. And that, of course, having a whole nother concert cycle to focus on is huge. And that's made a big difference. We incubate our freshmen in a freshman-only concert band.
Okay.
Our freshmen come to us from 5 different schools from the same district. Additionally, we get transfer students. We get kids from private schools, like anywhere else. But we get 60 to 70 freshmen a year, and incubate them to build leaders out of our very best players, to make that into a band family, and expose them to the culture that we want to create. And of course, fundamentals. Everyone talks about fundamentals, and it's all about establishing those norms so that they get excited about wanting to be the best musicians they can be, and you can make them the best musicians they can be. And then after that, they audition into this intermediate band, the symphonic band, and our Wind Symphony in the fall, and they have opportunities to audition for our symphony orchestra and all these other things that happen. And so I think that program structure is super important. And culture is super important. And I agree that fundamentals are important, but if you don't have the first 2 things, the fundamentals are just like a sideshow. You need to create the environment with which the students want to learn, And
to sidestep then for a second, what does culture look like here? Is it based on the history of the program, or are there new things that may have been added? student editions, director editions over the past 8 years, 10 years, 50 years, combination of both?
I think it is a combination of both. It's formulaic. I think that there is, one of the things that's important to us is that our students know that there's a history here, a deep history. And the program has been around for a long time. It's going to continue for a long time after them. And we kind of inspire and charge our kids with, listen, this experience is on loan to you for 4 years. What are you going to do with it?
Yeah.
It's yours. What do you want to do with it? Here's what we can do. Here's what's been done before. Here's the levels we've done them at. And it's time to rise up and do it and see where it goes, and we don't rigidly define, what it is we're going to do. We set goals and certainly talk about things and get kids excited about it. But ultimately we just kind of like pretty organically move forward, with where we're going. So the history piece is certainly part of it. But the other part of it is just like connecting the kids and the various activities from freshman through senior year so that they could see what's possible. They start to imagine themselves in those roles. They hear the upperclassmen doing these great jazz solos or, playing like crazy concert band music, and they just want to do that. They want to be the next person and do it their way, put their thumbprint on it. So that's an environment that we're cultivating continuously. I think you're always transitioning in a program. You're not trying to maintain, you're trying to transition to that next phase, that next level. So that's just something we're constantly focused on. That's one of those things at the dinner table. My wife's like, hey, you're staring off to space. Where'd you go? And I'm thinking about things like that. Like what's next? What's that piece that I can do? What's that?
Sure.
So when it comes down to the rehearsal, I plan everything out. I know how many rehearsals I have in a cycle. I know how many minutes of instruction I have. I know, what I want to do and where I want to get to by the end of each week. I know, this needs to be ready by this. I know that I'm going to put an event on the calendar that seems really early for them to have a performance so that we rally and get a performance out there. Even if it's a B+, A- performance, the cheek pinchers in our audience, the parents and grandparents and whatever, they're always going to think it's good. So I don't hesitate to get something out there early because it's going to rally the kids to do some of the heavy lifting early in the process. And then you continue to refine. I think one of the things I've learned in doing these conference performances or these big events, these last few years is just the how much our kids really need to perform in order to gain confidence performing. They do a lot of rehearsing. Everyone does a lot of rehearsing. But if you're a concert band, you're used to doing just a handful of performances a year. So doing more than a handful of performances really raises their confidence level. And if those kids are also involved in marching band or also involved in jazz and doing performances and performances and performances, they just get really comfortable performing. And so we started a number of years ago, my colleague Mike Lehman at the time, we started doing performances in the lobby of our school every Friday with aspects of our jazz program. We have a rather large jazz program here, 3 big bands and 6 combos. At one point, my predecessor even did 11 combos. And then he was like, what am I doing? This is a little too much. Yeah. So pulled it back to 9, and then we kind of recalibrated at 6. That's a comfortable number for us. And so every week, a different group is out in the lobby just playing, as people come in. And I often write them feedback after the performance, but they're getting out there and they're just playing a lot. And so that's been huge. Another kind of aspect to that.
So rehearsal wise then, what are we looking at? Because this is what I'm always fascinated, what the rehearsal looks like. I grew up in a place where we had private lessons at the time, and it was very, there was a lot of digging in, but sometimes it was very meat and potatoes. Concert F, Remington, Bacharel 12, and get to the music.
And go, yeah. Yeah, that was my upbringing too.
Yeah, and I think it's still that way in a lot of places. And if you can do that, cool. I can't do that. We have to focus a lot on fundamentals and things like that. So maybe what's that? I guess maybe that freshman rehearsal.
Yeah, and I'll get into the Wind Symphony too. I think what we ask our kids to do is ridiculous. I'll just say that. We have a 42-minute period, and we ask them to get their instruments out,
5 minutes
get to their seat in 2 minutes, and then we do a warm-up that none of us as players would call a warm-up in our home playing, and then blow our faces off for 35 minutes and put the horns away or whatever. So I'll just say, like, it's designed backwards, even in a college setting, let's talk about professionals. They're going to wake up in the morning, they're going to get warmed up in their comfortable way to play their very best and make sure their instrument's functioning. They get to the rehearsal early, they warm up more, and then they play the 2-hour union rehearsal or whatever it is, and do the concert. There's a lot that goes into that to do it the right way. And what we can do, we're limited by time in a public school. It's just impractical.
Yeah.
And so I teach my kids just to kind of do a smart 2-minute warm up. I don't want to hear the lick. I don't want to hear the marching band tune. I don't want to hear high range exercises. Let's be smart about it. And while we're using this 2 minutes after the bell to get our instruments to get to your seat, you should be blowing warm air through your instruments. You should be, doing long tones. You should be buzzing. You should be stretching your face, doing smart things before we collect as a group. And I have a countdown timer that I put on the board. So as soon as the bell goes, I hit the countdown timer and it counts down from 2 minutes. And at the end of that 2 minutes, we immediately play a B-flat concert just to calibrate the room and show show that class is starting. And so the kids play a B-flat, and this is in freshman band. And then we go through a series of warm-ups. Woodwinds we've written some exercises where the woodwinds are doing like chromatic scales or repeated notes or articulation exercises, while the brass are doing lip slurs. And the first lip slur they do is very basic, and then we add on to it for lip slur number 2, while the woodwinds again and percussion are doing, some scalar stuff. 3 and 4 are more complex to the point where they're, kind of by the end of freshman year, they're doing lip slur chromatic 1, 2, 3, and 4, which is what I expect the Wind Symphony to do every day, by the time they're there. So I'm constantly realizing that I'm feeding myself, in the top band. So the things that I'm doing in freshman band are the things that I want our Wind Symphony to be able to plug and go on day one, the start of the next year. So we do a lot of scale and technique exercises. They learn all their majors. Second semester we do all of a lot of reading, sight reading, and of the scalar passages and exercises in this book called I Recommend.
I remember that.
Yeah,
I remember. Oh my gosh!
Frankly, you can use anything.
Okay.
But the I Recommend book has like 4 or 5 exercises in every key. That build up and are scaffolded pretty well, and so we test on that every Friday. We learn a key a week and test every Friday publicly, in front of the whole band. And that's something Mike Lehman again came up with. I learned a lot working with Mike Lehman. He's a brilliant guy, and really scaffolds well, great analogies, just an excellent teacher. And so Mike had this system where he would test the kids every Friday on the scale of the week. We would shred a scale every week. We built a scale routine, going through each key and test every Friday. And we do 3-4 kids at a time. And it's enough where like it inspires the kids to, they have to play out even if they don't want to. And so you're not going down the line like old school one at a time where the kids are freaking out. They have the comfort of playing in a few kids, but it totally de-escalates their anxiety about being singled out. So it's not a thing. It becomes part of our culture to just hear kids play.
And within the sections, cross room, any combination, does that matter?
Usually within the section.
Okay.
Yeah, I'll go like, hey, let's hear first 3 flutes here. Okay, second row flutes. Let's hear U4, U5. I think I could see you all in here. And you could tell if a kid is not, it's enough where, it's out of 5 points in the grade book and they're playing out. And, we get the real result when we do our final exam because they go into a room with a camera and they do all 12 scales. And that's a real authentic assessment of do they know it or do they not, but we're building that confidence to get there by doing that weekly scale test in the fall semester. It's the major scales. In the spring semester, it's the I recommend, exercises that they're playing through with articulations and literacy and all that packed in. So that's the freshman experience.
Are there days you don't get to music?
For sure in the beginning.
Okay.
For sure in the beginning. And I will tell you that we spend 15 or 20 minutes of our 40 in freshman band on fundamentals every day without fail. That's not a lie. You can come and observe.
Sure.
15, 20 minutes, maybe sometimes 25. Hey, the last 10 minutes, let's switch to this piece, And, as you go through the year, you can do less of that as they buy in and they're like, you're hearing like, I'm listening for triggers. I'm watching for social cues, okay, we're having a really great day. Everyone is totally engaged. They're locked in. I don't need to remind them to play with a good sound. I don't need to remind this student to do this or sit up tall or whatever. They're locked in. I'm hearing all the triggers. We can move on today. And I don't, I don't make a big deal out of that. Or just like I'm hearing it. Let's go. And on other days, I hang on it as long as I need to.
Yeah.
I mean, you need to make that point. You don't give an inch. You have to establish who we are and what the bar is with what you're trying to do. So the freshman experience is super important, just super important. So that when they get to the Wind Symphony, the culture is there. They walk into the room, they want to play. They know how to warm up. You can get to the music right away. If we're going through lip slurs and chromatic scales and whatever the fundamentals are, and they are not locking in, I'll spend more time with them too on that, but most days they got it down and we're ready to get into it, and so because they know what they're doing and they're locked into it, we can tackle some of the more challenging music because there's time for it. When I first started, there wasn't as much time for it, so I had to be much more conservative on the music choice.
Sure. So then take us through the Wind Symphony rehearsal, if you wouldn't mind. Yeah.
So, in the beginning of a cycle, where obviously we're sight reading all of the tunes, and so we'll do more warming up at the beginning of the cycle, and then sight read the tunes, and I'll just make sure that I'm covering all of the ink on the first part of the cycle. We tend to do sectionals strongly on the front end. I've got a colleague, Haley Nickel, who I co-teach all the classes with, and we work in primary and supportive roles. So she supports me in the Wind Symphony, and I support her as she takes the lead in the symphonic band. And so she's a woodwind person, she's a saxophonist, and so she'll take the woodwinds and I'll keep the brass with me and sometimes percussion as well. We have a percussion instructor. We're fortunate to have a very talented percussion instructor, Dave Eisenreich, who's been with us now, 4 or 5 years. And he's doing great work, does percussion ensemble music with the students, but then also we'll go over some of the techniques and band music that we have going on. And so we try and front load a lot of the heavy lifting because we don't ever want to run out of time, right? I mean, I'll kind of make the call, just hearing where the group is at and, some of the more complicated things that need to be explained from a conductor standpoint about meter changes and tempos and how all that stuff is connecting. We'll start in full rehearsal with me and kind of take notes on that and then divide and conquer and then come back and Sometimes we'll have to make decisions about, okay, let's take this down the octave, or let's only have a couple of people playing this, or let's whatever, like those types of details, especially as we're, getting past the, second, third week mark of a 4 or 5 week cycle, something like this. One of the things that we do, though, is that we do chair tests. We reseat the band every quarter.
Okay.
And so we use material from the music we're playing. We use the first parts, and the kids, are tested on it. It's a grade. For better or worse. I mean, I have mixed feelings about that because, your seventh, eighth clarinet player is there because they're not the best person to play the first part. You know what I mean? But at the same time, you're hoping that your seventh or eighth clarinet player is hungry and wants to move up to that spot when that upperclassman graduates. And if they're not exposed to what is out there, you kind of have the same people. Or,
the other thing too with it is, hearing your band where your top group's playing a lot of advanced level literature, you could also say too is, think of it like the symphonies, part 1, part 2, and part 3. They're all challenging. They're all important.
Right.
Because I know once you get to that, I don't know if you're playing grade 5, grade 6 music, there's some third clarinet parts and third trumpet parts. I think about a Hindemith piece where I'm trying to think, was it like a third trumpet part? That's hard.
Oh, for sure. For sure. Yeah. And listen, the seventh and eighth clarinet player, for instance, we're using this example, if they deserve to be there. They earn the spot in the band. But what I'm saying is part of the, part of our work is the future. It's not just living in the now, and so we need to build the band behind the band. And so it is important to expose all the kids to what the principal parts are. And certainly your point is valid. There are some pieces that the third, fourth, fifth trumpet part, whatever it is, are really crazy too. And if you have the band to do that, great. Do it this year. But just in general, that exposure I think is important. So we reseat the bands every quarter and expose them to that, and that's part of it. So yeah, I don't know how much demystification I could do here. It's not me being secretive. It's just I know that, and I listen to your podcast a lot. I'm probably your first biggest fan.
Well, thank you. I'll get T-shirts made for you and I.
That's being interviewed. And as I said to you when you asked me to do this, I thought it would be cool to be your 200th guest or something like this, and not so early on in the process where I haven't done as much as some of the other folks. But I hear a lot of folks, not just on your podcast, but just in general, just really emphasizing the fundamentals, the harmony director, the shredding of, details and all of this. And it's not to say that I don't do those things, but I really emphasize the culture and the structure of the program and the momentum building and these types of things, and try to get the students bought in, because if it's just us doing the work and programming them, my college swim coach was good. One of the things he was really good at was building great workouts. We always knew that what he put on the board was going to be great, but we had to do the work. We had to look at each other in between breaks and push each other and say, hey, we got to do this. We got to get the time down. You're not making the interval. You need to step it up. Like, we were pushing each other. He drew it on the board and walked away. It was us that did it. And I guess I really emphasize, that our kids have to take ownership over the work, and they have to like the music. They have to really want to do it, Could,
not to further mystify it, as I'm listening to you, could the secret be that you find a system that works for your school, your students, your group, and then you're just consistent.
Yes, absolutely.
Is that maybe the difference?
Absolutely.
Is the consistency thing?
I think, and I said this in a recent presentation. I think doing this is a lot like surfing. You have to hone your technique of how to surf, but it's a lot about reading the water, reading the waves, and adapting in real time. You have to know your kids. Like when I listen to music and choose the repertoire, I'm not just, I'm choosing good music, and I'm choosing music that I like, that I'm going to really be passionate about for first concert cycle, but I'm seeing their faces as I'm listening. And if I don't see their faces, I'm not programming it.
Sure.
If I don't see there's a strong tuba. Oh, this is cool. No, I could see, Glenn doing this on trombone. I could see, so it's personalized to them, to the group that's out there. And I think that, I think that's why it's working here. It is formulaic, but it's also highly personalized. And
well, it ties back into what you said. You thought was one of the top two important things was the culture.
Yeah.
This is our culture, and culture might not always be here's a mascot, here's our band pizza party, but culture might be the way you found out your students have the most effective work ethic alone and together.
Right. And I think, who knows if that's going to work 2 years from now, 5 years from now, but right now that's really working. I think you have to constantly adapt to the times and the climate and the culture of the community as a whole, the building as a whole, the whatever. And right now for these kids in this time, it's working. And I'm hoping that I will be able to adapt. Because I have 20 years left or something crazy. I don't know. I hope that I will be able to adapt with the changing of the times and still be effective in the way that I'm finding myself most effective right now.
Sure. So then let's go on to talking about literature, which I know for a lot of directors is the most exciting thing, but also the bane of their existence at times to try to, figure out what works. Let me bring this up. You and I were at a party once and we were talking about, and it was summer. It was like middle of summer, the most middle of summer you could get. It's hot out. We're at this party and we start talking about literature because that's what band people do. And you pulled out of your pocket a list. I think it was a typed list of here's what I'm thinking of. And I said, all right, this guy's on another level. I had a lint and a quarter and a broken phone or something in there. So what does the literature selection process look like for you?
Yeah, so for about a decade or so, as long as Spotify's been around, I've been using Spotify. And one of the things I got from Ithaca, from Mark Fonder, was themed concerts.
Okay.
And my father was always into logic problems. He would buy a book of logic problems and take it on vacation, or be sitting there on the couch doing logic problems. And that never appealed to me. I was never very good at that. But I will tell you that the logic problem of putting together a concert with a theme that fits the group and has all the aspects of this would be a nice opening. This is a nice middle tune. This is this is a great closer. This fits the group. I hear, again, the personalization of, so-and-so the oboe player, so-and-so the English horn, whatever. For me, for others, it might be like a waste of time or an added layer to something that's already complicated. For me, it is the thing that focuses my mind on what needs to happen. And so when I'm talking about themes and all this, it's the top band. I wouldn't do that with the younger groups. Not to say that you couldn't.
Sure.
But the younger groups have the biggest swing in terms of their development. Some freshman groups develop slowly, some are going really quickly. So I can't plan out a year with a freshman concert band because I just don't know.
That's interesting. Okay.
With a advanced group, I kind of grab pieces and I think it through in terms of where the group typically is in development. So, okay, this would be probably a good third cycle thing, or this would be a good second cycle, or, okay, I'm going to start the year with a piece like this and build around it. They have more consistency as a top band, and especially with some of these opportunities, you come off at an opportunity middle of the year, and the group is like firing on all cylinders, and so you could do some more challenging stuff. They want it, they're ready. With the younger groups, that you just don't know, it's unpredictable, and so. For the advanced groups, it's all Spotify. It's me tossing stuff on lists in themes that make sense. And I build playlists. I have playlist after playlist that are themes that are, sometimes a theme is structured off of one piece that comes to mind. Sometimes it like instantly comes together as three pieces that fit. Sometimes I'm backwards fitting a theme to three pieces that I want to do, four pieces that I want to do. Occasionally, every once in a while, I'll say to the kids, here's what these pieces are about. Help me come up with a theme. How can we tie this together? Sometimes the spring concert is a lot more eclectic and it's a looser theme. Mm-hmm. Sometimes things are hyper focused, like we did a concert once, Baroque and in debt. So music that was actually from the Baroque time period, and then music that borrowed elements of Baroque music but was written more recently, and tying to that. So that's a very specific, thing. So with the younger bands, like everyone else, I'm going to conferences, I'm judging, middle school contests or doing clinics. I'm, watching Rachel Maxwell's posts from her,
Mm-hmm.
What she's playing, or what, she'll usually take pictures of the program that they, of the middle school festival that they do in Naperville. And so I'm taking all that. I'm looking at the Superstate lists of what's been played historically, especially by middle school bands for our youngest, freshman band. And I do heavy listening, and I, only put on my list things that I think are of a high quality, and I write notes to myself about it. And then as I get closer to each, the end of each concert cycle, like we've already picked music for our next cycle in March for the March concert. But we haven't picked stuff for May for our freshman and
Mm-hmm.
symphonic band. But we chose the stuff for the March concert before Thanksgiving break. We would, okay, here's where we're developing. This would be good. These are our strengths. Here's our weaknesses. Sometimes you pick music that is a home run and just fits the group really well. And sometimes you pick music going, yeah, this is really going to stretch them. And we need to pick this music to stretch them, to get them to this next level. So there's a lot of thought and intention there. I will say that, those of us that approach this as a hobby as much as an occupation have an unfair advantage because we're always listening. Like my top 10 Spotify tunes up until this year, where the Little Mermaid infiltrated the list because our two-year-old is way into it. All
using
10,
the 2-year-old as an excuse. That's okay.
3 of the 10. The rest of the 10 are concert band music that we're playing, that we have played in the last year, on Spotify. And the thing about Spotify that's great is, you build your lists and then it recommends stuff. It automatically just starts playing. And we played at Allstate at IMEC 2 years ago, and 2 of the 5 pieces we played were Spotify recommendations, and like obscure pieces that no one's ever heard before that were like really awesome.
Yeah.
And I got way into. I highly recommend it, and Apple Music does it too. I mean, any subscription service at this point is like, working in a similar way.
Sending you down the rabbit hole.
Yeah, and which is cool. Sometimes it recommends weird things or things that don't fit, and you just hit next, or, sometimes it just doesn't work the way you want it to. But But I've been pretty lucky with it recommending some things that I never had heard of before that would be super cool to play. So,
are there any suggestions of pieces offhand that you can think of that, I don't know, maybe are not as well known? You know, and if I'm putting you on the spot, sorry.
So
but like everybody knows the Grangers and the Holsts.
Yeah.
What about, you know, some other things we might not know about?
March for the Sultan Abdul Madjid by Rossini is a wonderful march that's not played very often, and we did it a few years ago, and the group like really played it well.
So you guys still play marches? Because I know there's some bands not touching marches,
and we'll do the Sousa stuff too. But
okay.
I you know, lately I've been doing marches that are off the beaten path.
Yeah.
I have programmed for May. I don't know if it'll, like, this is on my foresight. Who knows if it'll happen? But there's an Elgar march, March of the Mughal Emperors.
Okay.
And that's a march in 3. That's really kind of sinister and cool. You know, I would call it a grade 5 at least. March. That's pretty cool. That's off the beaten path. I think one of my favorite pieces that I think is a gem is Ito's Gloriosa.
Okay.
I think just from a content and conception and the compositional ideas that he has in that piece are just really, really well done. Adam Gorb's Yiddish Dances, I think, is a great piece that's not done very often. We did Savannah River Holiday, Ron Nelson. A lot of high school bands do the Rocky Point. I see that coming around, but Savannah River isn't played very much, and I just love that piece. Yeah, I mean, there's so much great music out there. There's so much, and I'm glad that I have a lot of time left to do it.
I always get afraid of that because it sounds like a lot of time, but then, you know, if you ever do the math of, I got 20 years, we played how many pieces a year, I get scared because I'm like, that's only this many pieces there.
I agree with you. I think I've already been here a third of the time as my predecessor. It like went by in a blink, you know? So I agree with you. And I haven't repeated a lot of pieces in that 8 years, but less than 3, I would think, in the top band have been repeated. I could probably name them. You know, so I'm still continuing to try and push that envelope. And lately I've been doing a lot more new music, and I had shied away from that, but some of my colleagues have pushed me to explore the newer music because I was a lot more traditional in my tastes. Sure. And, you know, the kids have responded, you know, see, this is the thing, is that, you know, the kids like what you like. Ultimately, at the end of the day, they like what you like because you're way into it, and they, you know, and they feed off of that. And so then they start to prefer the stuff that you put in front of them to play, because this is what I'm pushing out to them in Spotify playlists to listen to, and they start listening to it and they enjoy it, you know. But they've liked the new stuff too. When we've done the Michael Dougherty pieces or the John Mackey pieces, they've really enjoyed that as much as they like. First cycle this year, we did Strange Humors by John Mackey. We did Mothership by Mason Bates. And they really liked that stuff. And then this cycle, we're doing all transcriptions. We're doing Tam O'Shanter, Pines of the Appian Way, and Spoon River on this concert. And next cycle, we're doing all music by Omar Thomas, and he's coming out to work with the band for a few days in residence. And then the end of the year, it's looking like we're going to go old school again. So so we're just kind of all over the map. But I think that's one of those things that our students like. If you're way into what you're playing, you know, the kids start to prefer that, and they start to listen more to the stuff that they're playing. They enjoy it.
Absolutely. Well, let's do a couple more. Let's go personal, then we'll bring it back to some Evanston history here, and maybe end with some goals that you might have. Personal standpoint, you've got 3 children.
Yeah.
And you and your wife both work.
My wife now stays home.
Okay.
She was an orchestra teacher. She's actually a convert. She went to the dark side. She was a percussionist and a band person, and taught orchestra in Downers Grove for 5 years before we started having kids. And I think she was a really effective orchestra teacher because she brought a lot of the cultural things that we do in bands to the orchestra world that they don't typically do.
Yeah.
And that was one of the things that made her really effective. But now she's home with our kids, and she's way into that, and is very intentional about how she's raising them, and is doing a great job. And we've got 3 wonderful kids. Theo's 4.5. Marilyn is 2.5, a little more 2 3/4, and then we have a 5-month-old baby Jackson at home.
All right. And how does this look at home then, if you don't mind me asking? Does band come into play at home? Does it infect home?
Kinda, we have all the instruments in the house.
Okay.
We have like kid level instruments, and then we have a cornet that's set up for them to play with. We have a kid-sized violin, and all stuff that we've just like acquired as a musical family over the years. My wife and I actually for a time played in a rock band together up until recently. So that we bring the kids to the shows, and my parents or her parents would hold the kids, and watching mommy and daddy on stage rock out. And my wife played bass in that band, and I played guitar, and they're around it. I mean, she brings them to basketball games, and they're wearing their Wildcat shirts and watching, and they're coming to football games, and we, the school, and I know we'll talk about the school in a minute, but this is the largest public high school under one roof in the United States.
Okay.
So we literally have to rent a truck to go to the football game, and we parade. It's almost a mile. It's 9/10 of a mile from the band room door to the field. And so every Friday when we have a home game, we rent trucks to bring our equipment, and we parade down the street, and people come out of their houses and, cheer along. And my kids are there with us, marching into the stadium. And that's a lot of fun, for all of us. It's fun for me to have them there. It's fun for them to be there. Mm-hmm. And my daughter really likes Willie the Wildcat, who's our mascot and is in his thing, and cheering on the band. So band is definitely a part of our family because my wife is very intentional about bringing the kids to the school and being around it all. And admittedly, I'm singing a baby to sleep, singing "Handle in the Strand" or playing band music on my iPhone or a household speaker, and kids are like, "Is that Daddy's band?" I'm always listening.
I do Persicati, and then my kids just scream themselves to sleep. So then let me ask you this, and this is not meant to be offensive, but is there a work-life balance then? And then I guess the next question would be like, it kind of sounds like you don't always think of it as work. You mentioned the hobby thing, earlier.
Right. I think I have to be honest. I work a lot of hours, and at times that is to the expense of the family. And we have certain pockets of the year that are really pretty awful in terms of hours gone. Yeah. And we have calendar meetings in my house, my wife and I, and go over the calendar. And I think, my wife has said, recently, especially the last 2 years have been crazy because I finished a second master's. While Marilyn was just a baby. She was just born, and I started classes and was doing the weekly thing and writing papers and doing whatever. And, but it was a tough time, but it was the right decision to do it, then. Mm-hmm. We're glad it's done. My wife has commented that, she can see that I'm making decisions to scale back when I can and to step away from things when I can. But also understands that, this is a huge undertaking. This is one of the larger programs, and so there's a lot of moving parts, and there's a lot of things that I oversee, and it's actually a really challenging job to to kind of oversee all these private lesson teachers and color guard coaches and percussion ensemble coach and the flute choir coach and the whatever. I mean, there's a lot of things always going on. So to oversee all of that and be able to take a phone call and say, okay, you got to go and get the minibus and this is how to do it.
Yeah.
Step aside from the kids when I'm home or whatever. You know, there's a lot that goes into it. So I don't think that I have a balance. I think that I am constantly working at the formula that works for us, that we can live with.
Sure.
And I'm making choices when I am provided with choices to be home. I could tell you that Jackson came in July, our youngest, and I haven't been out socially since he was born. And so I just make the choice that I'm not going to, that's where I'm going to cut back right now. I'm not going to go to this hockey game. I'm not going to, go to the Cubs game this weekend or go out, for drinks with someone because I need to be home because I'm not going to be home for work these other nights.
Yeah.
So those are choices I make. I wish I had a better answer for you. I wish I could tell you.
No, and you know where I come from with that too, where, I mean, some of that's of course for our listeners, but for me, it's always trying to figure out, it's that balance, which, there's of course the fear of missing out. There's the fear of, well, if I do this, it's going to be better for the program. But the programs are also very jealous all the time, and they want more time and more time and more time.
Right.
Than it is at the expense of home. And I do think about that, of course, with my home situation too. I'm like, oh my God, here's another night,
Yep.
I don't know if you're like me, but sometimes I'll go home sometimes feeling guilty too, where I'm like, we had this great experience tonight, and it's like, well, that's great, but we've got just the normal undertakings of any family.
Right.
Here's dinner, here's the transportation, here's the homework, here's
we're not there yet. I mean, we have different challenges because our kids are young, but I imagine what that looks like, and we'll have to adapt and make some changes as we move forward, and there become transportation issues and getting the kids around.
Here's what it looks like. Every Saturday, so we have 5 kids, and the baby doesn't eat much solid foods yet, maybe an avocado or something.
Yeah.
Every Saturday, 18 eggs.
Oh my goodness. Well, when you made that post, first of all, it was hysterical how your last child came into the world and how you described it on Facebook.
And they still charged us too. I delivered the baby. They still charged us. We couldn't get out of that bill.
Right, and then you said, family of 7, gratuity included. Wow. I mean.
Well, and you'll get that with 3, or maybe if you haven't, where you go out to eat and people go, oh, okay, we got a seat next for you guys next to the boiler room over here. Go all the way to the back. 'Cause,
Yeah. Well, we wouldn't have it any other way, but it certainly has its challenges.
Well, and I think there are positives though too. Where it's great to hear you're like, listen, we bring the kids to the games. I mean, to talk about the cons of it is one thing, but I also think to think about the pros of like, listen, my kids got to grow up in an environment that was positive. There's music going on. They're getting to see. I mean, how many kids get to go with their parents to work? Mm-hmm. I brought my daughter to pep band the other night. She's in 5th grade beginning band. Brought her flute. She didn't play one note. She can't play the pep band music stuff, right? She's been in band 6 months. But she left and she's like, I got to hang out with high schoolers, watch this game, be a part of something. I got to see my dad working.
Yeah, that's super cool.
So, that's the cool part about it. So good to hear all of that. Well, let's talk real quick then. I know you're in a historical program here. Do you have like a brief history of either Evanston Township High School or the band or both that you'd like to share? Notable alumni, things like that.
Sure. I mean, the school as an entity was founded in the 1880s and had 2 other campuses or buildings before they bought the land here on Dodge Avenue. With incredible foresight, they bought a huge plot of land and built a considerable structure initially and then added onto it over time as the population boom happened. At one point, they even tried, they attached 4 buildings to the original building and tried doing a freshman, sophomore, junior, senior building idea for a while with electives and the added on fine arts wing and PE and sports in the PE wing. And then, they restructured to be by departments, more or less, as time progressed. It's a huge school, largest public high school under one roof in the United States. And we have 3.5 miles of hallways and a 5-minute passing period. So those of you listening and your kids that can't make it to class, just tell them like we do it. So, it's an incredible place. We've got over 12 gyms, 2 pools, a planetarium, an arboretum, an edible acre, where we grow, some of our own food that we're using in the cafeteria, that's done through a class. We've got a greenhouse, there's all these courtyards and, a historic central library. We have 2 working fireplaces in the lobby, gas fireplaces. There's a working fireplace in the faculty lounge. Some of these old things that are just like, who had the foresight to think of this? We have a giant auditorium, not just the 1,300 seats, but it's so wide and so deep, and it's got a pipe organ built into it. We have an upstairs theater that seats 300 and a little theater that's kind of a recital hall and small plays that seats about 100 kids or 100 people. And, so they had such foresight in planning all of this. We have a power plant across the street that generates the power for the school, and an irrigation system that recycles rainwater, just these things that they were smart about and making an investment in having this exist. And it's the only high school in the city of Evanston. There's like 80,000 people in the city of Evanston. So everyone that's attending a public high school comes here. So all those resources are in one, location, diverted to one location. So.
And the student population, some people, I think when they think Evanston, they think maybe a little wealthier and here's a college town, but aren't you guys at, it's like 40-50% low income or so?
For sure. And in terms of our diversity, we're a minority majority school. Yeah. So I think the white population is actually 40% or something like this, and or maybe it's I'm not good with numbers, but we're in retaining that specificity. But for sure, and that provides some very worthwhile and great challenges, but they're really challenging challenges in making that work in a school like this.
Mm-hmm. So as we get to the end here. Maybe you mentioned earlier maybe some famous or notable alums, by the way, from Evanston. I'm always fascinated by these things too.
Yeah. So I think I'll start with the ones everyone knows. Jeremy Piven, actor. Joan Cusack, actor. If you watch Workaholics, Anders Holm, actor. Jessie Mueller as a Tony Award-winning actress, class 2001. And then Ian Weinberger is a Broadway conductor. He conducts Hamilton.
Oh my goodness!
Class of 2005. In terms of the music scene, we've got Ethan Bensdorf, who plays trumpet in the New York Philharmonic, class of 2003. David Cohen, trumpet with the Milwaukee Symphony Orchestra. Let's see, from the jazz standpoint, Junior Mance, jazz pianist, class of 45, Bob Cranshaw, jazz bassist, class of 52. Lots of folks just have come through this place and gone on to do great things and be well known for their craft. So
well, good job to Evanston.
Well, I think that's one of those things that they came through here, certainly I think the program had played a role in cultivating their experience, but I can't say that we produced.
Sure. Well, but when you think about it too, especially in the arts, I mean, the big festivals and all that stuff, they're great, right? But at the end of the day, I think, I look at it as like, here's the opportunities that we're, and sometimes an opportunity is just, here's a theater festival that we host here at the school. Sometimes it's, here's this out-of-state trip that we're doing, and for some kids somewhere, that's just going to light up like, oh my gosh, this experience changed me, and this is where I need to go now. So,
yeah, for sure.
Very cool. So as we end here, what you got 20 years left. What are some goals you can think of for yourself and for the program?
Well, I don't know. I think it's important that the program develops a well-roundedness and doesn't have just this one thing that's built around me and my talents or focus. And so as we move forward, I was a euphonium player. I played bass in high school jazz band, but we played like If This Is It.
Sure.
Huey Lewis in the News and Let It Be by the Beatles. I wouldn't say I had a really great jazz exposure. I really learned jazz by being in the hot seat and having to figure it out, which is how we learn so many things, I think, in this profession. There's only 4 years of college and you gotta learn it all. So I've recently been trying to really stretch myself with jazz, and so I know that we're going to try to apply to some conferences with the jazz ensemble. It's really happening this year, and we've got a special group returning. So I think that's something that we're gonna shoot for. I go back and forth about the Midwest Clinic with our Wind Symphony for a number of reasons, philosophical and otherwise. Because of what you need to do to get in, you kind of have to shift your gears to prepare, for that application process in order to be ready to lay down a really great take in February or whatever it is, and that takes shifting priorities. Not only for the year you apply or every year you apply because the odds are low, but then once you get in, you got to shift priorities again. So it
kind of takes 2 to 3 years of your
whatever. I mean, it could take us a million years. We could infinite and never get in. So I
meant just the process itself, the application.
For sure. Yeah. So I don't know. I have mixed feelings about that, but I certainly, it keeps coming up as a potential, opportunity to shoot for. I'd like to see our marching band do, like the Macy's Thanksgiving Day Parade or something fun like that.
Yeah.
And I know that's a shot for it's a challenge for a non-competitive group like us that is not out there doing that all the time. But with the right planning, we could have a shot at something like that one day. I don't know, just some of these like neat opportunities that speak to the interests of every kid in our program.
Yeah.
Like we have so many kids in our program, and not everyone is going to make the Wind Symphony or the top jazz ensemble. So what things are we doing to explore their interests and kind of speak to every alum, out there that had an affinity for what they did here in the program, and what sort of things are we doing to maximize, those experiences. So just, continuing to think about, those more global things.
All right. Well, Matt, thanks so much for coming out here this morning, taking time away, and certainly appreciate this, and hoping to see you again soon besides just band events here.
Yeah, sounds good.
Thanks, Matt.